Welcome, maid. Even though she knows I'm here to meet her for a marriage introduction, this is the first thing she says. What? I let out a confused noise, thinking I must have misheard her. My future mother-in-law, Vilma, looks at me with a mean smile. Oh, you're not the maid? With such a poor-looking face, I thought you were, she says. My fiancé, who I thought was on my side, betrays me in the worst way. He glances at my face and bursts out laughing. You're right, she does have a poor-looking face. I'd love to see her parents, Oscar says. Vilma and Oscar continue to mock me and even insult my parents. I can't stand it any longer. While they aren't looking, I send a message to my father, asking him to come right away. My father replies immediately, saying he will be there soon. I need some fresh air, I say, unable to listen to Oscar's insults any longer. Don't run away. Oscar's crude laughter echoes behind me as I leave the room to wait for my father's arrival. 10 minutes later, I introduce my father, Folky, to Oscar and Vilma. Here's the maid's father, Oscar says with a calm voice but an unsmiling face. Wait, father. Vilma's face freezes as she recognizes my father. I am Elvira, turning 33 this year, and I work at a small company. I've always tried not to stand out, so my usual makeup is just foundation, and I prefer wearing navy or black clothes. I don't wear contacts. Instead, I wear thick glasses because of my high prescription. I dress this way because my father has a high-profile job and I've been influenced by it since childhood. My father is an actor. He was quite popular back in the day and often surrounded by women when walking through town. Even though he often played supporting roles, he appears on TV quite often and is moderately well-known. Middle school was tough because of my father's fame. Classmates would ask for his autograph, and their parents would ask to meet him. Since I refused all these requests, I was often criticized and faced harassment from jealous classmates. I didn't want to trouble my beloved father, and I also hated the thought of being seen as the one who was getting carried away. Struggling with these thoughts, I dressed plainly and went to a high school where no one knew me. Fortunately, I have a common surname, so I could live normally from high school onward. Maybe because of my plain appearance, men didn't approach me, and I could enjoy a carefree student life. I loved talking about comics with my female friends, and those times felt like the happiest. I met my fiancé Oscar after becoming a working adult. Oscar worked for the leasing company that provided the copy machine my company uses. My direct interactions with Oscar were minimal. He would regularly check on the copy machine, and we would exchange a few words during his visits. Our relationship took a significant turn when the copy machine broke down one day. I was busy preparing materials for a meeting happening the next day, but then the copy machine stopped working. I was in trouble because, without it, I wouldn't be able to prepare the materials for the meeting. Panicked, I called Oscar for help. He came right away and fixed the machine, saving the day. After that incident, we started talking more. He seemed kind and helpful, and I began to trust him. Eventually, we started dating, and he proposed to me. I thought he loved me for who I was, but now, seeing him mock me with his mother, I realize how wrong I was. As my father arrives, Vilma and Oscar's mocking smiles disappear. My father, with his calm yet authoritative presence, stands beside me. Vilma, recognizing him as a famous actor, is speechless. I stand tall, no longer feeling small or insignificant. They might have seen me as plain and unworthy, but now they see the truth. I called Oscar, and he came quickly to check the copy machine. Can it be fixed? I asked anxiously. With a reassuring smile, Oscar replied, "Don't worry, I'll take care of it." I fell in love with Oscar's smile instantly. Although he couldn't fix the copy machine, he arranged for a replacement, and we managed to prepare the materials in time for the meeting. From that moment, I felt drawn to Oscar and made an effort to get closer to him. I asked for his contact information and called him often. Eventually, I confessed my feelings to Oscar, and we started dating. Oscar was always very kind and considerate, and I never saw him angry. I thought he would continue to be kind even after knowing about my father's fame. So, after dating for 3 months, I boldly proposed to Oscar, and he happily accepted. I remember being very happy. However, there was one thing that concerned me: my appearance. I had always worn thick glasses and dressed plainly, even on dates. It's a habit that's hard to break. The real me looks just like my father, with distinct features. Because of my appearance, I was envied by girls in middle school and judged by guys based on my looks. It was tough, but I thought it would be okay with Oscar. I considered changing my appearance little by little for Oscar, whom I loved. But after we got engaged, I started feeling more and more uncomfortable. Before our engagement, Oscar seemed like a kind person, but recently he started making remarks that looked down on me. The other day, we went to a bridal fair to decide on a wedding venue. Since Oscar suggested it, I went along. The place Oscar took me to was dazzling, a luxurious guest house perfect for a large wedding with over 150 guests. Seeing that scene, I felt confused. I don't have many friends from school and didn't want to stand out, so I had hoped for a small ceremony at a modest venue. I wanted to go home right away, but Oscar seemed to be enjoying himself, so I couldn't bring it up. I endured and spent the time there. After it was all over and we stopped by a cafe, Oscar was in a very good mood. The wedding venue we saw earlier was nice, wasn't it? I personally would like something even more extravagant, he said while drinking coffee. This made me feel anxious, so I decided to talk to Oscar about what I wanted. I was thinking a wedding with just the two of us might be nice. I don't like standing out too much, I said, hoping the kind Oscar would understand and compromise. However, his reaction was completely different. Oscar looked at me and laughed scornfully. Indeed, a plain girl like you wouldn't suit a venue like we saw earlier. There's probably no dress that suits those thick glasses of yours. I was bewildered by Oscar's remark. Isn't a wedding about both families? I asked, confused. My family is wealthy, and not having a certain level of wedding would be embarrassing, he continued. I was speechless. The Oscar, who had always been kind, was now looking down on me as if he was a different person. I was deeply shocked by Oscar's attitude. To the bewildered me, Oscar made an even worse comment. You should just keep quiet and do as I say. A plain woman like you should be grateful to be getting married at all, he said harshly. Suddenly, Oscar became serious, throwing even more harsh words at me. I was stunned and hurt by his cruel remarks. I was so baffled by Oscar's remark that I even felt scared. The next moment, Oscar smiled and said, I'll decide everything for you, so you just need to do as I say, okay? I didn't know how to respond and just smiled awkwardly. Maybe getting engaged to Oscar was a mistake, but it was too late to act as if it never happened. I had already told both our parents and my company about our engagement. Despite all this, I still loved Oscar. Maybe he would return to the kind Oscar I knew before our engagement. So, despite my confusion about Oscar's change, I had no choice but to continue with the engagement. Oscar continued to make comments that troubled me, and with each one, my heart grew more wounded. But I couldn't bring myself to hate Oscar. Even when I thought about breaking up, the kind Oscar I knew flashed through my mind. I still loved Oscar after all. One day, something happened that confused me even more. It was the day Oscar and I finalized our wedding venue. After visiting several places, Oscar decided on the luxurious guest house we had first visited. With pride, Oscar said, I guess a lavish ceremony really suits me. It's unfortunate for you, though. Oscar laughed, hurting me. For the paperwork, we went to that guest house together. On the way, we encountered someone. "Oh, is that you, Oscar?" A woman called out. "Mom, what are you doing here?" Oscar looked surprised. Then he introduced her to me. "Elvira, this is my mom, Vilma." "Mom, this is Elvira. She's my fiancée. I told you I was getting married, remember?" Vilma greeted me with a smile. "I'm Oscar's mother. You seem like a serious woman. Where do you work? You must be working at a major corporation, right?" This was my first meeting with Oscar's mother. I nervously told her about my company and that I do clerical work. Vilma made a puzzled face. "I've never heard of that company." Oscar joined the conversation. "Elvira's company is one of my sales destinations. It's a small company with about 40 employees, so it's natural that you don't know it." Upon hearing Oscar's explanation, Vilma's face turned grim. "I thought since you were Oscar's fiancée, you'd be working at a more reputable company. Doesn't that mean your salary is low? Are you planning to make Oscar suffer?" "I'm sorry. Indeed, my salary isn't very high at my current company," I said, apologizing to Vilma. Vilma sighed heavily. "Can you at least not rely entirely on Oscar? Our family is of a distinguished lineage. We don't need a woman of unclear origin, okay?" I responded to Vilma's remark with confusion, but she became even more heated. "What about your parents? They work at reputable companies, right?" Vilma glared at me with narrowed eyes. My father is." As I was about to answer, my eyes drifted to her bag because I saw something familiar. I fell silent. Seeing me struggle, Oscar spoke up. "Come on, Mom, calm down. We're going to visit the house and make our marriage introductions soon, all right?" Though I'm not really in a welcoming mood, Vilma said, glaring at me with a sour face. It seemed my first impression on Vilma was the worst, and the path to marriage seemed too steep. I secretly sighed, and then the day of the marriage introduction arrived. Wow, I couldn't help but mutter in front of Oscar's family home. The scene before me far exceeded my expectations. Since Vilma had mentioned that their family was of a distinguished lineage, I had expected Oscar's family to be wealthy, but the reality was even more astonishing. The gate was automatic, there was an elevator inside, and there were even 10 luxury cars parked outside. Surely they must be the hobbies of my father-in-law. Oscar then spoke to me. "Dad is out for work today. It's just Mom, so make yourself comfortable," he said with a smile, but my face became even more strained. Vilma had been harsh to me last time, and I was sure she would make some sarcastic remarks again. Oscar and I entered the living room where Vilma was waiting. "Hello. Thank you for the other day," I greeted Vilma politely. The next moment, Vilma said something unbelievable. "Welcome, maid." Even though she must have known I was there for a marriage introduction, this was the first thing she said. "What?" I let out a voice of confusion, thinking I must have misheard her. Vilma looked at me with a mean smile. "Oh, you weren't the maid? You've got such a poor-looking face," she said. A maid? How could she say something so terrible? I thought. Then Vilma laughed with a look of enjoyment. "Oscar told me it's okay to treat you like a maid. It seems like Oscar just wanted to marry someone who would do as he says." "Too bad for you, Oscar," Vilma said. "What do you mean?" I asked Oscar with a pale face, hoping it was a bad joke. The fiancé I thought was on my side betrayed me in the worst way. Glancing at my face, Oscar burst out laughing. "You're right, she does have a poor-looking face. I'd love to see her parents. Maybe we could use her parents as our servants too." Oscar laughed vulgarly. "Indeed, having someone obedient for free is attractive, but if they come to a wealthy house like ours, I wonder if Elvira's parents would faint from shock," Vilma said. Vilma and Oscar continued to look down on me. "By the way, what does your father do? He's not homeless, is he?" Vilma asked with a laugh. "That's not." I started, but Oscar burst into laughter and replied to Vilma. "Mom, That's not a job. Since Elvira is like this, it's certain he doesn't have a stable job. I'm laughing so hard my stomach hurts, Oscar said. Vilma and Oscar continued to mock my parents. They assumed my family's education was low and decided I must have a plain appearance. I gritted my teeth in frustration listening to their remarks. Vilma and Oscar were too rude. They even looked down on my parents. I couldn't stand it any longer. I sent a message to my father while Vilma and Oscar weren't looking. I need you to come now. I also sent him the map to Oscar's family home, which Oscar had sent me for today's marriage introduction. I remembered that today was my father's day off. He must be relaxing at home right now. Fortunately, my father replied within a minute. I'm on my way. Seeing my father's reply, I felt relieved. Then I spoke to Oscar and Vilma. I'm feeling a bit unwell, so I'm going to get some fresh air, I said, needing a moment to compose myself before my father's arrival. I couldn't bear listening to Oscar's remarks any longer. I thought I would wait outside quietly until my father arrived. That's what I thought. Oh, is that so? Well then, Oscar, why don't we continue our tea leisurely? Vilma seemed pleased to be alone with Oscar. Elvira, don't you run away. Oscar's crude laughter echoed as I left the seat and waited outside for my father's arrival. 10 minutes later, my father appeared, wearing dark sunglasses. Elvira, what's wrong? Today was supposed to be your marriage introduction, right? He asked, puzzled. Dad, I'm just so frustrated. Seeing my father, I felt relieved and started to cry. No matter how much I tried to hold back, tears kept flowing. What's wrong, Elvira? My father began to panic seeing me cry. I explained everything to him, how Oscar's attitude had changed after we got engaged and how Vilma joined him in looking down on me. I can't forgive them for looking down on you without knowing anything about you, I said, unable to stop crying. My father listened silently, but it was clear he was quietly angry. Then I told my father something about Vilma that made him laugh. He took off his sunglasses and handed them to me. We're going in now. I'll make sure they regret hurting you. With my father's words, I made up my mind. My love for Oscar had faded, leaving only hatred. I've made my decision. We'll make Oscar and his mom regret it. I did something unexpected. I put on my father's sunglasses. Together, we entered Oscar's family home. I stood in front of Oscar and Vilma, bringing my father with me. Sorry to keep you waiting, I said firmly. Seeing me wearing sunglasses, Vilma initially laughed but became stunned upon seeing the man beside me. She must have thought she could say something terrible again when I returned, but unfortunately for her, I wouldn't let things go her way. I planned to drag her through hell instead. Vilma must have already recognized who my father was. Then my father spoke to Vilma. I'm the maid's father. His voice was calm, but his eyes were not smiling. His handsome face made him appear even more formidable. What? Vilma, who likely recognized my father, was shocked. How could this be? Why is Folky here? Is this some sort of surprise? Vilma spoke with agitation, her cheeks turning a bit red, her eyes sparkling like those of a young girl. Oscar seemed clueless, standing there stunned. My father didn't answer Vilma's question but kept staring at Oscar and Vilma. Vilma blushed under my father's gaze, an embarrassing sight for a woman of her age. I looked at Vilma coldly. Then Oscar, regaining his composure, asked in confusion, Folky, Mom, is he a friend of yours? Oscar probably didn't know about my father. He was well known among Vilma's generation, but younger people might not recognize him unless they watched dramas on TV. Vilma glared at Oscar. Oscar, how rude of you. This man is a famous actor and my first love. What? Oscar looked incredulous. Then Vilma turned towards my father, smiling and speaking to him. I'm a big fan of yours. Folky, see, look at this. Vilma brought out her purse to show my father. It was a keychain that could only be bought by a fan club member. "I've been a fan of you for over 23 years," she began, expressing her admiration as a longtime fan of my father. "Mom." Oscar seemed appalled by Vilma's sudden change in behavior. Vilma continued to speak to my father, her mood greatly elevated by the presence of her favorite actor. However, my father's gaze on Vilma was very stern. After remaining silent until now, my father finally spoke up. "I understand that you're a fan of mine. However, did you try to treat my precious daughter Elvira as a maid?" Vilma, who had been highly spirited until now, turned pale and froze. She trembled visibly, which was evident from her shaking. Ignoring Vilma, my father continued, "And you assumed I was homeless without even meeting me? That's quite rude of you." Saying so, my father glared at Vilma. Vilma started to panic. "No, I didn't know Elvira's father was you. Having you join the family is more than welcome, right, Oscar?" "Yes, of course." Oscar seemed pushed by Vilma. Then Vilma tried to justify herself to my father. I was dumbfounded listening to Vilma. She had been looking down on me and my father until she saw him, and just like that, she changed her tone. It was nothing but distrust. "If you look closely, Elvira is a wonderful woman who resembles Folky, and my earlier comments were just out of jealousy for fear of losing my son. If I had known about you, I would have behaved more politely." Vilma desperately tried to make amends. My father looked at her as if she was bothersome. Watching their interaction, I thought, I can't let my father be troubled any further. This was my issue. I should be the one to speak up to Vilma. So I told Vilma, "I'm breaking off the engagement with Oscar, so there's no way you'll become family with Dad." "What? Elvira, I'm sorry. This is my chance to become family with Folky. Please reconsider." Vilma tried to persuade me with a face that looked almost tearful. After all her terrible behavior towards me, even her tearful face couldn't be trusted. I looked at her coldly, yet Vilma thought she could somehow convince me. Seeing me silent, she smiled at me. "You want to marry Oscar, don't you? I won't oppose it anymore. It's okay. I'll do anything for you." Vilma clung to me, desperate to become family with my father. Her willingness to do anything was the complete opposite of her initial stance. I felt contempt for Vilma, who changed her opinions so frequently. I murmured softly, "No, thank you." "What? What did you say?" Vilma tilted her head as if she hadn't heard me. So, I shouted louder this time, "I absolutely do not want to become family with you." "What?" Vilma was taken aback by my outcry. I confronted Vilma with my feelings. "You made derogatory remarks the moment you heard about my job, and you spoke terribly about my father. I can never forgive that." I made my stance clear to Vilma, but seeing her turn to my father, realizing persuading me was futile, she spoke to him with a smile. "Elvira says this." My father interrupted her. "Elvira has made her decision, and I fully support her. This engagement is off." Vilma's face fell, and Oscar stood there, still in shock, unable to process the turn of events. The look of disbelief and desperation on Vilma's face was almost pitiful. "Almost. I think it's time for us to leave," I said, looking at my father. He nodded, and we turned to leave. As we walked away, I felt a sense of liberation. The weight of the engagement and the toxic behavior of Oscar and his mother were lifted from my shoulders. I knew that this was the right decision, and with my father's support, I felt ready to face whatever came next. "Folky, you want your daughter to be happy, right? Our family is wealthy, and surely your daughter will be happy with us." Vilma tried to argue. "Indeed, some people might think happiness comes with money, but not me," my father countered, understanding my feelings. "Elvira values love over money. Besides, our family has money. I, being an actor, earn a decent amount." Vilma was at a loss for words. It wasn't surprising. After all, my father frequently appeared in dramas and didn't struggle with money. Given our family's wealth, there was no merit in marrying just for financial stability. Vilma fell silent, unable to come up with a good counterargument. My father continued, "You say you're a fan of mine, but I despise someone who neglects my precious daughter. Could you please not call yourself a fan anymore?" He glared at Vilma. Vilma burst into tears. "If Folky hates me, I won't be able to live," she sobbed uncontrollably. Oscar, who had been silent until now, began to speak. "Elvira, you'll regret it if you break off our engagement. No one will want someone like you," he sneered. "Wait a minute, Oscar." Vilma tried to stop him, concerned about my father's reaction, but Oscar didn't stop. "I chose a plain woman like you thinking you'd be obedient. I was planning to cheat on you with cute girls once we were married. So annoying that my plan's not going to work anymore." Hearing Oscar talk about things I hadn't even asked, I calmly realized there was never any love from Oscar. He just wanted a convenient woman who would obey him. My love for Oscar had long since faded. While I was thinking this, Oscar kept making selfish statements. My father gritted his teeth, looking like he might grab Oscar at any moment. "Dad, wait." I stopped him. I let out a smile while still wearing my sunglasses. "What's up?" Oscar seemed a bit taken aback by my composed smile. "Is this still plain?" I took off the sunglasses with a flourish. Oscar froze, looking at my face. It was only natural. I had applied makeup after meeting my father and crying. Normally, I only wore foundation, but now I had on eyeshadow, mascara, and eyeliner. It significantly changed my appearance. "Is that really you, Elvira?" Oscar's face turned a bit red, mesmerized by my makeup-enhanced face. "Yes, it's me. I've always downplayed my looks to avoid standing out, but I've decided to stop hiding myself. Until now, I stood out unwillingly because of my father, so I had been modest to avoid attention. But being spoken ill of by Oscar and Vilma made me think it was okay to stand out a bit and show my true self. Oscar, with a flushed face, said, "If you had been like this from the beginning, I would have been nice to you. Even now, we can start over. Come on, let's get engaged again and introduce me to some beautiful actresses through your father." Who would go on with the engagement now? And the audacity to ask for actress introductions. I made my stance clear to Oscar. The engagement is over. I don't need someone like you anymore. I'll cancel the wedding venue too. What? Oscar was stunned, but I wasn't about to let him off that easily. "You made derogatory remarks the moment you heard about my job, and you spoke terribly about my father. I can never forgive that," I stated firmly. "You only cared about appearances and status. You never truly cared for me." Oscar tried to speak, but my father cut him off. "Elvira has made her decision, and I fully support her. This engagement is off." Vilma and Oscar stood there, speechless. "It's time for us to leave," I said, looking at my father. He nodded, and we turned to leave. As we walked away, I felt a sense of liberation. The weight of the engagement and the toxic behavior of Oscar and his mother were lifted from my shoulders. I knew that this was the right decision, and with my father's support, I felt ready to face whatever came next, what she deserved. As for Oscar, his future didn't look bright either. His father, infuriated by the disgrace and financial burden brought upon the family, cut him off financially. With the cancellation fees to pay and no financial support, Oscar struggled to make ends meet. He tried reaching out to me several times, apologizing and pleading for a second chance, but I had already moved on and blocked his number. My father and I returned home, leaving the toxic encounter behind us. The support and love from my father gave me the strength to put this chapter behind me and focus on my future. I decided to embrace my true self and live confidently, no longer hiding behind a modest exterior to avoid attention. Soon after, I reconnected with old friends and made new ones, immersing myself in social activities that I had previously avoided. I also advanced in my career, gaining recognition for my hard work and dedication. My self-esteem grew, and I began to feel truly happy and fulfilled. A few months later, at a charity event, I met someone new. Unlike Oscar, he was genuinely kind, humble, and respected me for who I was, not for how I looked or who my father was. We started dating, and our relationship blossomed based on mutual respect, love, and shared values. Reflecting on my experience with Oscar and Vilma, I realized that sometimes people need to reveal their true colors to help us understand our worth and the importance of standing up for ourselves. What initially seemed like a painful and humiliating experience turned into a valuable life lesson. I learned to prioritize my happiness and self-respect, and to never settle for less than I deserved. In the end, Oscar and Vilma's story served as a reminder that treating others with kindness and respect is fundamental. Their downfall was a consequence of their own actions, and I hoped they would eventually learn from their mistakes and strive to become better people. As for me, I moved forward with a stronger sense of self-worth and a renewed outlook on life. The future was bright, and I was ready to embrace it with open arms, grateful for the lessons learned and the support of my beloved father. It's astonishing how life unfolds sometimes. 6 months later, Oscar found himself in a situation he never anticipated. He was arrested for stalking me. Despite my clear rejections and blocking his calls, Oscar's obsession with me only grew. He began to loiter near my house and incessantly called, pleading for another chance, but it was evident that he was fixated solely on my appearance. It was a stark reminder that true love and respect should transcend physical attributes. Refusing to tolerate his behavior any longer, I sought help from the authorities. After filing multiple reports and enduring threats, my father and I decided to take legal action. Eventually, Oscar was apprehended for attempting to forcibly enter our home. The consequences were severe. He lost his job and was left with a mountain of debt. It was a harsh reality check for someone who had once looked down on others so arrogantly. Meanwhile, I transitioned into a new role as my father's manager. Managing his schedule, attending events, and negotiating on his behalf became my daily routine. It was a significant departure from my previous clerical work, but I found immense satisfaction in supporting my father's career. I wanted to repay him for all the support he had given me over the years. Working alongside my father, I embraced the challenges and joys of my new role. While it demanded adaptability and long hours, the opportunity to support my father closely made it all worthwhile. Today, I continue to strive for excellence, knowing that I'm making a meaningful contribution to my father's career and our shared future.